Hello, everybody. A very good morning to you. It is 7 o'clock and you are very welcome to join us on The Breakfast Show here on Sky News. Let's start with the news about a bloody battle for steelworks in the besieged Ukrainian city of Mariupol. We're hearing from a commander at the heart of it this morning, and we'll talk to the former head of the British Army, General Lord Dannatt, and the former British ambassador to Russia, that's Sir Andrew Wood. It's Thursday, the 5th of May. Heavy, bloody battles. A Ukrainian commander inside the Mariupol steelworks under attack speaks out as Russian forces attempt to take it.
I'm in the capital, Kyiv, where President Zelensky says efforts will continue to rescue people from Mariupol, with more than 300 recently evacuated.
Polls have opened in elections across the United Kingdom, with thousands of council seats being contested across England, Wales and Scotland, while voters in Northern Ireland have their say on the Assembly. Bank of England is expected to increase interest rates to the highest level in more than a decade. We ask what it means for you. Holding back tears, the actress Amber Heard gives her first evidence in the Johnny Depp libel trial.
This is the most painful and difficult thing I've ever gone through, for sure.
Beijing tightens restrictions as it tackles a rise in COVID cases, with schools and gyms shut.
Hand of Wad. Maradona's iconic shirt has been sold, but for how much? We'll discuss that and its history after 9:30. Also coming up on the programme for you this morning, wherever you're watching around the world, should elephants be kept in zoos? We'll speak to Chester Zoo as a new report calls for the gentle giants to be set free. You're the one that I want. You're the one that I need on stage. Can a new production of Grease stand up to the 70s classic? We'll find out when we speak to the actress starring as Sandy and the choreographer, Dame Arlene Phillips. Hello everyone, a very good morning. We begin with the bloody battle for a steelworks in the besieged Ukrainian city of Mariupol. A commander of the Ukrainian Azov regiment holding the line at the complex claims Russian forces have been attempting to storm the plant 2 days running. He's described the heavy, bloody battles taking place. Video from the Donetsk People's Republic shows what appears to be the Azovstal steelworks under heavy bombing. Sky News has verified the video's location to the Azovstal plant, but the date of the footage remains unknown.
Since the 25th of April, we've been holding a circular defence at the Azovstal plant. It is already the second day that the enemy broke into the plant. There are heavy, bloody battles. I am proud of my soldiers for making inhuman efforts to contain the enemy's onslaught. I thank the whole world for the tremendous support of the Mariupol garrison. Our soldiers deserve it. The situation is extremely difficult, but we continue to carry out the order to keep the defence despite everything.
Well, more than 300 civilians have now arrived in Zaporizhzhia after being rescued from Mariupol and the surrounding areas in evacuations coordinated by the UN and the Red Cross. President Zelensky has rescued those still trapped in the besieged city, and he says it's not going to be easy, but he was hopeful they too could be saved.
We agree and hope to continue rescuing people from Azovstal and Mariupol. There are still civilians, women, children. To save them, we have to continue the regime of silence. The Ukrainian side is ready to provide it. It takes time just to get people out of the basements, from those hiding places underground. Under the current conditions, we cannot use special equipment to clear the rubble. Everything is done by hand, but we believe that everything will work out.
Let's bring in Deborah Chatui, standing by in Kiev for us as usual this morning. I say as usual, but of course you've been there a long time now, haven't you, Deborah? The fighting goes on. Two things to talk about, I suppose. Mariupol to start with.
Yes, it's an absolutely desperate situation. The Foreign Minister was speaking to Mark Austin yesterday about the Azovstal evacuation efforts. The UN is at the heart of trying to negotiate safe passage for those civilians still trapped under there. And the fact that they haven't been able to get everybody out just underlines the lack of trust between the two sides. Russia's military claimed that there would be humanitarian corridors for civilians today, tomorrow and the next day. But as you can see, at the same time, they are also bombarding the area, given that this is the last remaining stronghold of Ukrainian resistance in a city that is otherwise under the control of Russian forces. And these people have been under there for months now, without proper access to food, water, medical supplies for those who are unwell. There are elderly people there. There are children there. It doesn't bear thinking about, and you can feel, listening to Ukrainian government officials talking about it, just how painful this is, but also just how important that Ukrainian resistance has been in terms of drawing in Russian firepower and preventing Russia from being able to claim a victory over this strategic city.
And something I also wanted to touch on, if I may please, Deborah, is the direct hit on a theatre where we believe up to 1,000 civilians had been sheltering from the bombing. At the time, we were told that potentially 300 people had died. Latest reports from an international wires service suggesting that could be more than double.
Yes, so the Associated Press has done a stunning investigation into what happened on that 16th of March attack, a Russian airstrike on this theatre that had been used as a shelter by civilians, by women, by children, huddling there, hoping for rescue from Mariupol. And instead they'd written children in white letters on the ground, in big enough letters for Russian planes to be able to see that. Russia initially has denied doing it, blaming the Ukrainians, then saying the Ukrainians have been using that theatre for soldiers. None of that has been substantiated by evidence. The absolute contrary, in fact. The witnesses that the AP has spoken to talk about how women and children had been sheltered there and then were killed there by this airstrike, those who survived stepping over the bodies of the dead. And actually now, given that the area is under Russian control, the ability to be able to independently count the number of dead is impossible. And yes, like you say, the witnesses saying that they believe up to 600 people could have been killed in that airstrike, which would make it the deadliest attack, single attack of this war so far. OK,
Deborah, for now, thank you. Thanks a lot. Well, joining us now is the former British ambassador to Russia. That's Sir Andrew Wood. Hello to you, Sir Andrew. Thank you for joining us on the programme this morning. Absolutely shocking news coming out of Mariupol, both at the steelworks and also the number of dead as a result of what appears to be a Russian targeted strike on a theatre where women and children were sheltering.
Horrible. They don't care, the Russians. And they lie about it anyway.
I understand. Where do you think this is going to end, Mr. Ambassador? We know that next Monday, I think, is a big day, isn't it? It's Victory Day in Moscow, in Russia. And it had been thought that by then, Putin had thought this war would be won. What do you think will happen now?
Well, he thought he was going to win it a long time before, but in fact he's losing heavily. And I think we have to realise that he cannot win the war in the sense of achieving a settled outcome. Nobody in Ukraine is going to forget what he's done and what his forces have done and the way they've done it. That in itself is a defeat. Secondly, it is apparently the case that he's already lost more Russian troops to death than they lost during the war in Afghanistan. I think he's in a terrible fix in that way. But Russian propaganda is completely, it doesn't care about the truth anyway. So presumably he will try to work up some sort of story. probably that it's all our fault. But I think he's in an impossible position.
We are being told by the Kremlin that President Putin is still open to talks with President Zelensky. Do you believe him?
Well, I'm sure he's open to talks with Zelensky, provided Zelensky agrees to Russian conditions, whatever they are at that moment. There is I don't think there could be any real dialogue until the results in the eastern region are clear. If Russia continues to lose troops at the rate that they are, then they can have talks about Russia retreating, essentially. If he wins, in the sense of slaughtering more Russians, slaughtering more Ukrainians, it still isn't a victory because it's not a permanent solution to anything.
We also must keep an eye on what Belarus is up to. We are being told that they're conducting military drills. How much of a threat do you think this might be to Ukraine?
Well, if Belarus was ready to send its troops in and mobilize fully, it would, of course, be an increased threat. But the Belarusians so far have been extremely cautious about doing anything. And some Belarusians, at least, have decided to fight on behalf of the Ukrainians. So I think Lukashenko has to watch his control over his own country, which is already fragile. So again, I think it's something which may happen, but I do not believe it's going to be a full-scale invasion from Belarus.
Just hearing from the Ministry of Defence this morning saying Russia will likely seek to inflate the threat posed to Ukraine by the exercises that we are hearing about in Belarus, and ordering to fix Ukrainian forces in the north, preventing them from being committed to the battle for Donbass. I suppose that's a reasonable theory, isn't it?
It's a reasonable theory, and if it happened, of course, it would be a threat to Ukraine. I do not think, however, it would reduce a surrender to Russian conditions or Belarusian conditions from Ukraine. Ukraine at present is it's holding its own very, very well indeed, and it's revealed the fact that the Russian army, and I would believe the Belarusian army as well, is of limited experience and skills. We all believed, or most of us believed, that if the Russians did invade in February, it would be quite a quick win for them because of the numbers of troops and because of the idea that we all had about their effectivity. But I think we forgot that the Russians have actually had rather little experience of fighting hand-to-hand or between troops. What they did in Syria, for example, is flatten cities, just as they did flatten the cities when they were at war against Chechnya, and as they would have done had they felt it necessary in Georgia. Controlled and wide-scale fighting has not been their skill, and their effect has been very poor from that point of view. As I understand from military men, I can't pretend to have done it myself, but it is a complex thing which they have not succeeded in doing.
What more do you think Britain could be doing at the moment, and indeed wider Europe?
I think what Britain is doing at present is stalwart and effective. It's certainly won the affection of Ukrainians, and it's also increased Britain's standing and attitudes in the whole of Eastern EU, if you like. I was recently in Estonia, for example, And our word had quite a lot of value to it. The idea that Finland and Sweden may also join the EU now is it's an absolutely radical change, and a radical change for Russia. I can only hope that in the end, the Putin regime will take account of some new realities and be different, he said cautiously.
Yeah, indeed so. Mr. Ambassador, it's always a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you for taking the time to join us on The Breakfast Show on Sky this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Still to come on the programme for you this morning. In the next hour, speaking to the former head of the British Army, General Lord Dannatt, as reports emerge of Russian soldiers, I should say, attempting to storm the Mariupol steelworks. Joined by a university student doing her part to help people fleeing the fighting in Ukraine by donating sanitary products to those most in need. And the World Health Organization is warning of a crisis of epidemic proportions with more than 1 million obesity-related deaths in Europe each year. We'll hear from the GP, Dr. David Lloyd. Ali's with us to talk about, good morning, talk about Bank of England. Why?
Yes, because we are expecting interest rates to rise. The context of this, of course, is soaring inflation that the Bank of England are grappling with. We heard the Governor of the Bank of England previously talking about trying to balance growth versus inflation. Today, we expect this lunchtime that base interest rates could be raised from 0.75% to 1%. That is a 13-year high, the fourth month in a row that we've seen the Bank of England doing this. Why does this matter for ordinary people? Because it might help people potentially with savings, although it does take time for those sorts of savings to get through to consumers. But it is bad for people who are in debt and people that have mortgages because, for example, fixed rate, variable rate mortgages rather could become more expensive in terms of how much you're actually paying back. So this could have an impact on a lot of people. As I say, inflation has soared. We know it hit 7% back in March. It's not just a UK problem, it's a worldwide problem. In the US, the National Reserve there raised their interest rates to a range between 0.75 and 1. Just yesterday in Australia, we've seen interest rates raised. In India too. Global problems, things like Ukraine, the COVID lockdown in China having an impact on all this. But we expect that decision from the Bank of England this lunchtime, Kay.
She's a beautiful building, isn't she, the Bank of
England?
She is a beautiful building. Yeah. Trivial pursuit question for you. Do you know what she's called?
Oh, my gosh.
You'll never forget now. The Old Lady of Threadneedle Street.
Kay, great knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, you know, every day's a school day. So we'll find out at midday today what's going to happen. Spoiler alert, I did get an email from my bank saying, we're very sorry that interest rates have gone up and we were here to help, blah, blah, blah. And then 2 hours later, this was earlier in the week, 2 hours later, they wrote back and said, we sent that in error. So I think we know where we're going with that.
Expectations are there,
Okay,
yeah.
OK, thanks a lot. Let's look at some of today's other headlines for you now, should we? And polls have opened in elections across the UK. More than 4,350 seats are being contested in England on over 140 councils, with all of Scotland's 32 councils and all 22 councils in Wales also holding local elections. Voters in Northern Ireland are electing representatives to the Stormont Assembly. Polling stations close at 10 tonight. A Virgin Atlantic flight was forced to turn around half an hour after it took off, after it emerged that one of the pilots had not completed all of the training required by the company. It happened on Monday as the flight was on its way to New York from Heathrow. How would you feel if you were on that flight? Furious that you had to turn back, but also glad that you did. Now, the Premier of the British Virgin Islands, Andrew Fahey, will plead not guilty to drug trafficking. Mr. Fahey was arrested last week in Miami by agents from the US Drug Enforcement Agency posing as Mexican drug traffickers. He's been granted bail ahead of his upcoming trial. Look away now. If you are a Blue in Manchester, Real Madrid have beaten Manchester City in extra time in the Champions League semi-final. The match finished 3-1 on the night, 6-5 on aggregate. It sets up a final between Liverpool and Real in Paris on the 28th of May. Beijing has announced new lockdown restrictions to limit the spread of COVID-19. Gyms and schools will be closed indefinitely and restaurants limited to takeaways. What on earth is going on? Tom's in Beijing for us. Hi, Tom. I was reading Bill Gates and what his views are on what's happening in China at the moment. You're the man on the ground. What's going on?
Morning, Kay. Yeah, it feels really like a slow motion lockdown. We had a public holiday over the last few days and they announced these temporary measures that restaurants would be shut, that schools would be shut, that gyms would be shut. Those temporary measures have turned out to be a bit longer lasting. They're being extended indefinitely as Beijing tries to get on top of this. And one of the ways they're doing that is mass testing. So this district, Chaoyang, 3.5 million people, we've had to get 3 tests on 3 consecutive days. You can see one of the booths behind me. Around Beijing, some 20 million people took 3 tests last week, so they can try and map the spread of this. Now, the numbers we're looking at have been pretty steady, around 50 a day, but they are worried about that, and they want to avoid a full lockdown like we've seen in Shanghai. You might remember the scenes over the last few weeks. People really, when we say lockdown, it's much more severe than anything that's seen in the UK or even Australia. People confined to their homes, they have to rely on the government to deliver food, often weren't getting enough food, and we saw lots of protests as a result of that. That's what Beijing wants to avoid. It feels like it has caught it. It's got on top of things earlier than Shanghai did. The good news for Shanghai, though, is it looks like it might be coming to the end of that lockdown. Cases have dropped a lot. They were around 25,000 a day at its peak, and they're now around 5,000. So perhaps some hope those restrictions will be eased. But this is all part of zero COVID. It is here to stay. As the rest of the world is opening up, it feels a bit surreal to be going through potentially another lockdown here in Beijing. Right now, it remains really in the balance.
OK, I suppose the question that a lot of people are asking, our viewers are asking this morning, though, Tom, is what's happening there as serious as it potentially was last time, and is it heading our way?
I mean, what they're dealing with here is Omicron, the same thing that the rest of the world is dealing with. And the reason they're not doing it in the same way as the rest of the world is because of the low vaccination rate, especially amongst the elderly, especially because they've been using Chinese vaccines. They refuse to import Western mRNA vaccines, which seem to be more effective against Omicron. And then you've got a very weak medical system on top. So China has taken the decision that if it were to open up, it would lead to a catastrophic wave across China, which could bring risks for the rest of the world. If you imagine a population of 1.4 billion people, not high levels of vaccination amongst the elderly, there's the potential for new variants to emerge here in China, and who knows what they could look like. So China's looked at that and said, despite the pain of this on the personal level, on the economic level, because this is costing China, and it is starting to cost the world as well in terms of supply chains. It's hard to get parts from one factory to another in this country, let alone get them out of the country on a container ship, when you've got Shanghai, the biggest port city in the world, operating under those restrictions. But China says, despite all that, it is much riskier to try and open up. So they're going to stick with measures like this for a long time to come.
OK, thank you. Thanks a lot. Well, the actress Amber Heard has given her first evidence in the libel trial with Johnny Depp, sometimes seeming close to tears. A warning, this report from our arts and entertainment correspondent Katie Spencer contains descriptions of abuse.
Will you please state your name?
Yes, it's Amber Laura Heard.
Her ex-husband had given evidence. Now this was Amber Heard's turn.
I struggle to find the words to describe how painful this is. This is the most painful and difficult thing I've ever gone through, for sure.
She set out how their romance began on the press tour for the 2011 film they made together, a whirlwind of passion and lavish gifts.
When I was around Johnny, I felt like the most beautiful person in the whole world. You know, it made me feel seen, made me feel like $1 million.
Interspersed with Depp's drinking binges and signs of his controlling behaviour.
He would make these comments about, you know, myself out, but do so in the context of me acting. Every time I was walking out of the house, he would ask me, "That's really what you're wearing, kid?" You know, like when I'm standing there, you know, just hit the wall, screaming at me. But then he would disappear and get clean and sober, and he'd come back and tell me that he was done drinking.
The first time he'd hit her, she claimed, was after she'd laughed at his tattoo.
And he slaps me one more time. Hard. I lose my balance. at this point, we're sitting next to each other on the edge of the couch, or I was on the edge of the couch. And I'm all of a sudden realizing that the worst thing has just happened to me. God, did he just hit me?
The court also heard graphic details of a sexual assault she said she suffered as Depp searched her body, claiming she was hiding cocaine from him.
He said he was looking for his drugs, his cocaine, his coke.
While Depp, in his evidence, has claimed he was in fact the victim of domestic violence, Heard has said that at his worst she feared him and felt lonely and trapped. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
Of course, that case continues. Now, the first COVID lockdown saw people flee to the country in search of space and fresh air, but Sky News analysis has found that many are now choosing to return to the city. As you can see, looking at our graphics for you, population growth in parts of North London and Salford has been far above that of the English average. And having stagnated or even gone down over the lockdowns, rents in London and Manchester are once again on the rise. Well, Aisha is standing by for us in central London. In fact, I think I'm right in saying you're in Piccadilly Circus looking at what's behind you there. Tell us more, Aisha. Good morning.
Morning, Kay. Yeah, well, all of this comes down to the fact that in terms of opportunities, cities have more opportunities both in terms of work and also socially. Now, the Sky News data team looked at a couple of things. First of all, GP records, they're a good indicator of where people are moving to, and they showed that more people have moved to London and Manchester. They're the two popular cities. And then also they looked at rent. Now, rent has seen an increase beyond pre-pandemic levels, and it was Greater Manchester where it was highest, around 12.5%. And as you said, when looking within London and Manchester, the most popular areas seem to be North West London and Salford, just outside Manchester city centre. Both saw population grow by around 6%. And when it came to ages, it was an increase across all age groups, but in particular for London and Manchester, it was an increase in people in their 40s moving to these areas. And then looking at Liverpool, the number of people in their 30s increased by nearly 7%. Although Birmingham seemed to buck the trend, it saw a reduction in the number of people in their 20s living there. And like I said, all of this coming down to both work opportunities, but the number of social opportunities too.
OK, capital city of England, waking up this Thursday morning. Thanks very much indeed, Aisha. Thank you. Close look at why people are deciding to return to the city. Joining us now, Joe Threlfall, who recently made the decision to move away from the suburbs back to the city. Hi, Joe. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Why did you decide that suburban life was not for you?
During the kind of lockdown period, I was isolating with my parents back in the outskirts of West Yorkshire. During that time, I was working remotely, like many people my age in my sort of industry of work. We were very much used to working remotely, but throughout my whole life, I've very much been a city person. I've liked the aspect of socialising, networking, and also having the accessibility to work in an office environment. During the pandemic, I was offered pretty much my dream job. I was approached by Embryo, which is the digital marketing agency that I work for. I'm the head of PR there, and the position was in Manchester, where the office is located. So kind of during the period of the last part of that lockdown, I was working remotely with the rest of the staff, and then I was able to relocate last April. So I've been living now in Manchester for just over a year.
And how is it living in the city rather than living in the suburbs? Do you enjoy it more? Is there much more to do? I suppose it's very different because, of course, when you're in the suburbs, it was lockdown, so you couldn't do very much anyway.
Yeah, definitely. I think suburb life has its perks, being able to kind of reconnect with nature, definitely during the lockdown periods, being able to go for walks, runs, having that accessibility to have that kind of daily exercise, which were recommended at the time. But I really craved being able to socialise. I'm very much an extrovert as a personality. And that's something that I definitely struggled with having many friends that didn't live nearby. So being able to relocate into a city again when things were easing up, where people were able to eat out again, socialise in a kind of 2 metre distance format was great. And also just to meet my team as well, face to face, which was a lovely experience.
It's good to talk to you. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. Good luck with the new job. Thank you.
Welcome.
The shirt, I should say, worn by the footballer Diego Maradona when he scored what he called his Hand of God goal has sold for more than £7 million at auction. During the 1986 World Cup quarter-final, the ball clearly hit the Argentina's player's arm. I think it was his hand, actually, before going into the net for the first goal. That game saw England knocked out of the tournament. The buyer of the iconic shirt is still unknown. There we go. Quick look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
It'll be fine for most today, but patchy rain in the northwest will become heavier later before spreading south on Friday. England and Wales are quite chilly at the moment, while Scotland, Ireland and Northern Ireland are milder but much cloudier with a little patchy rain.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Who doesn't fancy a bit of Dolly Parton? First thing in the morning, she said she's honoured and humbled to accept her induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Bit of Jolene?
Jolene, 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 I'm begging of you, please don't take my
Sing along when you know the words.
Jolene, Jolene,
You know what it's about?
Jolene, Jolene.
I once went to the Grand Ole Opry and they honour her there as well in Nashville, Tennessee, but I've never been to Dolly World. Have you? Let me know. Country music legend had initially resisted the honour, saying she hadn't earned the right and would respectfully bow out. But the Hall of Fame said the decision was up to voters and the 76-year-old has now been inducted. Eminem, Lionel Richie and Duran Duran were also given the honour, which is amazing. Lionel Richie's daughter actually just recently become engaged, which is amazing, isn't it? And I know the guy that she is marrying. He is an absolute legend. Now, some of the funniest moments in British sitcom history immortalised in Lego. A fan from Slovenia has been recreating famous scenes from Only Fools and Horses. Why was I saying Only Horses and Fools? It's that time of the morning, including the iconic moment where Del falls through the open bar. That is hilarious if you've never seen it. Zazo Zibert got the idea after watching repeats of the show on Slovenian television. Have you ever wondered what a baby squirrel looks like? There it is. Can move in a bit closer, Matt, and show them. Here's a remarkable photograph of a red squirrel carrying its kit in its mouth as it climbs a tree. The image was captured by photographer John McRobbie during a walk at Loch Leven in Scotland. You'll know, of course, that we don't see the red squirrel in much of the United Kingdom anymore. I think a bit in Lancashire, up in Cumbria, Lake District area there, and then up towards Scotland. Grey squirrel, much bigger squirrel than the red squirrel. And the world's only non-optlets, 9 babies from the same birth, have celebrated their first birthdays. Oh my goodness me, can you imagine? It was hard enough with one. The babies are still being cared for by the specialist clinic in Morocco where they were born. Their dad says they are all in perfect health. Can you imagine when they've all got a cob on all at the same time? Goodness me. Well done, Mum and Dad. Now joined by a university student doing her part to help people fleeing the fighting in Ukraine by donating sanitary products to those in need. That to come in just a moment. Top stories for you on The Breakfast Show here on Sky News this Thursday morning. More than 300 civilians have been evacuated from Mariupol as Russia's assault on the devastated Ukrainian city continues. Polls have opened in elections across the UK, with thousands of council seats being contested across England, Wales and Scotland, while voters in Northern Ireland have their say on the Assembly. Bank of England is expected to raise the base rates of interest to its highest level in more than a decade. Now, a former British ambassador to Russia has told this programme that President Putin cannot win the war in Ukraine through a settled outcome, and that his forces are suffering heavy losses. I began by asking Sir Andrew for his reaction to the attacks on the Mariupol steelworks and theatre.
Horrible. They don't care, the Russians, and they lie about it anyway.
We know that next Monday, I think, is a big day, isn't it? It's Victory Day in Moscow, in Russia, and it had been thought that by then Putin had thought this war would be won. What do you think will happen now?
Well, he thought he was going to win it a long time before, but in fact he's losing heavily. And I think we have to realise that he cannot win the war in the sense of achieving a settled outcome. Nobody in Ukraine is going to forget what he's done and what his forces have done and the way they've done it. That in itself is a defeat. Secondly, it is apparently the case that he's already lost more Russian troops to death than they lost during the war in Afghanistan.
As millions of people fled the fighting in Ukraine, a student at Bristol University wanted to find a way that she could help. Ella Lambert travelled to Poland to help distribute period products to refugees who'd made their way to Warsaw. Ella is with us now. Ella, it's one of those things that people fleeing war and people don't think about that sort of thing, but it's a plague for very many women. And thankfully, people like you have come to their aid. Tell us more.
Absolutely. I think the thing is with these situations, when you have a conflict, when you have any situation where people are in poverty, period poverty is inevitable, because if you have to pack your bag and leave within minutes without knowing where you're going, the chances that you remember to pack period products is really unlikely. And if you do, they run out. And so a year and a half ago, during the first lockdown, I set up an organisation to make reusable sanitary pads like this. There's one here which is made with Ukraine in mind, to distribute all over the world to refugees who can't really afford products. And so they last 3 to 5 years and really sort people out for the foreseeable future. And so obviously when everything happened with Ukraine just over 2 months ago, we realised as an organisation that, millions of new refugees, we have a part to play in this, and we have to make sure that period poverty is on the top of the agenda for organisations and that we ourselves are doing something about it. And so we got together with Pads for Refugees, an American NGO, and we've raised over £7,000 and distributed, I myself distributed pads to 1,000 women in Warsaw, in one of the refugee centres, and we're sending reusable pads to 2,000 women in Lviv, in Ukraine, and to be sent off to hospitals in the east where supermarkets are really running dry of the most basic products, and new mothers are going to need these products as postpartum pads.
You've had a lot of help, haven't you, as well? Others have come along to help you produce these products.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it has been amazing. We have over 1,500 volunteers now in 9 different countries, and yeah, I mean, we had 200 new volunteer inquiries after the war in Ukraine broke out. And I think that really shows this wave of empathy that people are feeling right now for Ukraine, and that people really want to help. And I think that's really beautiful. And that's what I saw in Warsaw as well, that, people are opening their homes, opening their arms, giving every possible aid that they can give. But I will say that right now, seeing what's going on with the UK government, bringing in this policy to send people off to Rwanda, I want people to really think about, if this happened to you tomorrow, because it really could, as we've seen, what response would you want to receive when you fled your country? Would you want to receive what Ukrainians have experienced right now? Or
Ella, I'm going to have to stop you there. I'm so sorry, but because of the day that it is today, we can't really talk about politics in any way, shape or form. So I'm just going to have to leave it there. But you do get our hero of the day for the amazing work that you are doing and thinking outside the box. Thank you so much for joining us on the programme. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. For the fourth month in a row, the Bank of England is later expected to raise the base rate of interest, pushing it to its highest level since 2009. Marta de Souza is a property expert and developer, and she is with us now. Hi, Marta. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Lots of homeowners, especially with mortgages, of course, looking with some trepidation towards midday today. What sort of problems might it cause?
Well, it's tough. We've had record low interest rates for such a long time that people's perception of what they can afford has been severely altered. We have had very low rates. With these rising rates and the expectation that they'll rise to around 2.5% per year, we could see a little bit of a slowdown in the housing market. I say this because the housing market is extremely robust. Last month, we had also another growth in house prices. They've grown yet again, but with inflation rising to a 30-year high and increasing energy prices, and again, these interest rates going up, affordability of homes is going to be hard. The robust housing market has continued through the pandemic. We've had, again, increased growth as well, once again, 14.3% at some points. And I really feel like these interest rates may dampen the growth, but not substantially, that there's a lot of momentum. The people that will struggle, however, are those on variable interest rates, not fixed rates on their mortgage. And again, those mortgage prisoners that are stuck with very low equity in properties, those are the ones that will truly be harmed by this rate rise.
OK. You say a slowing in the price of property. Are you potentially anticipating a fall? Can you still hear me? Oh, I think I might have lost Marta. Hi, Marta. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Yes, yes.
OK, I was just asking you. You talked about a slowing in the house prices. Would you anticipate potentially a fall in some areas?
Well, I do think in some areas of the country, yes. However, I don't foresee the huge fall and the huge price market check that a lot of experts are predicting. That's because they predicted it for this COVID pandemic year. It didn't happen. And that's also to do with a very simple economic problem. It's the supply and demand. When interest rates go up, people don't want to move. It costs them to move as well. People will hold on to their properties. Lack of supply. What does that mean? Demand is still going to go up, but we're going to have prices still keeping quite high. I do think it will slow down, so we're not going to have these record growths. I mean, we saw record growth by Nationwide last month once again, but we are going to see a bit of a slowdown. And in some areas of the country that have been, like London, that have been increasingly fast, we may see in some areas a little bit of a decrease. Will it be enough to make homes affordable at £265,000 like they have been last month? It's a record average price as well, once again, pushing through that barrier once again. I don't foresee a huge check in the market. The UK housing prices are always very strong, and they continue to surprise us.
Just before I let you go, Marta, what do you make of this latest survey suggesting that we saw people flooding into the suburbs during the lockdowns and the pandemic, but now bored with that and coming back into the cities?
Yes, it always happens. Whenever there's a big crisis, it happened during the London bombings. People fled out of London only to move back in. It was expected that a few people would stay out because of Zoom and all other types of online work, but they have come back in because people want to be where the buzz is, where their friends are, where they can go to restaurants, where the high streets are. We're social human beings, and I do think that will be a continued trend. You will always come back into the cities, and that's why the cities are appealing to live in, and why you've got an average house price of 565,000 in central London and 265 for the rest of the country. People want to live where more people are. So yes, I do think it will continue to go through that trend, and we'll see people moving back into the major cities.
OK, great to talk to you. Thanks for the analysis. Much appreciated. And a reminder that we'll be hearing more about what's going to happen to interest rates at midday today, and Ali will be coming back onto the show in just a short time to explain what it might mean for you. It looks as though interest rates could go to the highest level in more than a decade. Of course, you find out about it first here on Sky News. Meantime, there's been anger in the US over a move that could make abortions illegal in some states. Here's Martha Kendler. She's been speaking to campaigners about what options women could be left with. Just want to warn you, this report contains an interview describing home abortions.
America is facing off and facing up to the likelihood that half of its states will soon make abortion illegal. Many of these protesters weren't alive in 1973, when access to abortion was enshrined in the Constitution in a ruling known as Roe versus Wade. This woman was. Carol Downer recalls a time when abortion was criminalised. She can't believe it's happening again.
It is a blow. We are going to be hurt very badly by this.
Carol helped create an underground network of women who performed home abortions, teaching them how to use this instrument.
The material goes out through the tubing into the jar.
Known as the Del-M, Carol calls it menstrual extraction, and it can be used to terminate a pregnancy. She thinks more women may turn back to using it.
Well, I'm just very happy we have it, I guess. I mean, I'm mad that we have to have it, but I want to see women, not shamed to learn about their bodies, and us taking charge of it, and then not having a doctor who can say whether, in many times, whether he will be willing to do the procedure.
Postering, painting murals.
Other groups are launching information campaigns about abortion pills, which can be delivered by post for women in restrictive states.
Abortion pills are in our hands and we won't stop!
These activists took those pills outside the Supreme Court, they say, to prove they are safe.
This court cannot stop us. We will get the medication to the people who need it. And we will share information about abortion pills and where to get access, because this is a fundamental human right.
Women die when they don't have the right to abortion.
26 states in America are poised to outlaw abortion if Roe is overturned. Other states are promising they will be safe havens.
I hope we're a little bit of beacon of hope, a bright light.
The California governor pledging abortion will remain legal there.
This never happened in our lifetime. They're taking away rights that have been affirmed over and over again and well established. They are taking them away. Wake up, America.
If America is asleep, it will surely soon be shaken from its slumber. A decision just weeks away, which has the potential to further fracture this country. Martha Kellner, Sky News, Washington.
Now, you'll have noticed we haven't had any politicians on the programme this morning, and that is because there's Dylan, the dog, of course, and that's the Prime Minister. He's not just taking him out for his morning walk, he is, in fact, taking him to the polling station. That looks like Westminster Hall, I think it is. Polls have opened in elections right across the UK today. More than 4,000, that was quick, more than 4,350 seats are being contested in England on over 140 councils, with all of Scotland's 32 councils and all 22 councils in Wales also holding local elections. Votes in Northern Ireland are electing representatives to the Stormont Assembly. Polling stations close at 10 o'clock tonight. We are expecting to also see, during the course of the programme, the leader of the opposition and also the leader of the Lib Dems also taking the opportunity to cast their vote, as is their democratic right. Fossils dating back 66 million years have been found outside a shopping mall in Bangkok. They were first spotted by a shopper who posted a photo on social media. Now, Thai experts have confirmed that the shells are genuine and belong to marine creatures that lived more than 60 million years ago. In total, they found more than 70 fossils embedded in the footpath, ranging between 2 centimetres and 12 centimetres in size. Meantime, let's tell you what's going on as far as the World Health Organization is concerned. It's warning of an obesity crisis of epidemic proportions, with more than 1 million people dying in Europe each year. And they say food delivery apps supplying unhealthy food could be one of the contributing factors. What does our next guest think about that? It's the GP, Dr. David Lloyd. Hello to you, Dr. Lloyd. Good morning. I can't quite hear you, but I'm sure you are there.
Sorry,
there we go. I can hear you now. I can hear you now.
Sorry,
Doctor,
I'm
what do you
shut.
think about the suggestions that people having Deliveroos and other Just Eats, other delivery food systems are available, is meaning that people are getting fatter?
Well, I think there is some substance to that. Speaking personally, I broke my leg 8 weeks ago on the ski slope, and so I've discovered the joy and the beauty of home delivery apps, food delivery apps, and I can tell you that it is incredibly tempting to overorder and get large quantities of food arrive instantly, and I can quite see how that can contribute to this obesity phenomenon that we've got throughout the whole of Europe. So yes, I must say it chimed with my personal experience when I read that this morning.
How's the leg?
It's getting better, thank you very much. I can walk, which is great. I'm going back to work today, so it's a big moment. Yes.
Oh, fantastic! And did you overeat?
Yes, I certainly did overeat. Yes, but you've got to watch very carefully, and I think that is the thing. The delivery app that I used actually does have the amount of calories in each order you make, and that's something that I was quite impressed with. So you've got to watch what you eat. And you've got to count your calories. And if you do that, I think you can order safely and enjoy the absolutely amazing delivery times that these organisations now provide. I'm overwhelmed with the service they've got.
Welcome to the 21st century, Doctor. Have you noticed with your patients a rise in obesity levels?
Yes, it's a really big thing, and it really does fuel all sorts of other diseases as well. And I think that's the thing. Do you remember we got into a big thing about smoking? We know that smoking causes lung cancer and chronic lung disease and heart disease. And I think that message has got over, and we're slowly getting on top of the smoking epidemic, although a stubborn few remain still smoking. I think we've got to get into that mindset now with being overweight as well. We've got to handle this very sensitively, but we do really need to tackle the fact that as a country as a whole, as a continent overall, we are overweight, and that overweight is contributing to cancer, to heart disease, and as you get older, the weight really does count. It has an effect on your joints. It reduces your ability to exercise, and you get into a sort of vicious circle, which is jolly difficult to get out of. So it is something that we really ought to be tackling.
Okay, Doctor, it's good to talk to you. Good luck on your first day back at work. Thanks for taking the time to join us. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. And I've also broken my foot, which is why I'm wearing trainers at the moment. And so I can't exercise either. So I'm also having to keep an eye on the calories that I'm eating. But I'm also putting weight on. What can I say? See you top of the hour. Do hope so.